My name is Lydia Harper. I'm 28 years old and my life changed at my brother's wedding. It was a beautiful day full of hope, but for me it was the day a dream died. I stood there holding a gift I'd poured my heart into and listened as my own brother Nathan publicly humiliated me. "You're too broke," he said. "Leave the gift and go." My heart shattered into a million pieces. I left that night not knowing how I'd ever put myself back together. I thought I had nothing, but I was wrong. That moment of public shame became the fire I needed. It led me on a journey to find out what true worth really is, the kind of wealth no one can take away. So what happens when the very person who tried to break you one day sees your face on the cover of Forbes magazine? The tables don't just turn, they become unbreakable. You're too broke. Leave the gift and go. I'm ashamed to have a sister like you. That sentence didn't just humiliate me, it rewrote the story I thought I was living. It cut through the music, through the sound of champagne glasses clinking and polite laughter, through everything fragile I'd built since leaving home. People turned to look, some pretending not to, others whispering behind napkins. The band hesitated mid-song, then stumbled back into rhythm. My brother Nathan stood at the center of it all, his arm looped proudly around his bride, smiling, as if he'd just said something witty instead of cruel. He didn't even flinch. He wanted it to hurt. He wanted me to feel small. I didn't move. The ballroom lights, soft and gold, blurred for a moment as I blinked back the sting in my eyes. I held the small velvet box in my hands, a gift I'd poured my heart into, a handcrafted gold pendant engraved with "Always Family." It had cost me more than I could afford, but it wasn't about the money. It was a symbol, or at least it had been. Nathan's voice was calm, too calm. "Seriously, Lydia, what are you doing here? This isn't your crowd. Just leave the gift and go before this gets awkward." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I was invited," he smirked, out of pity. "Don't make me regret it." The guests at the nearby table exchanged uncomfortable glances. My mother gave a thin smile, trying to salvage the family image she guarded like a crown. My father adjusted his tie, pretending to study the wine list. No one spoke. So I placed the box gently on the table beside the glittering centerpiece and said, "Congratulations, Nathan." He raised his glass like a victor saluting his conquered foe. "Thanks, sis. Maybe next time aim higher." I turned, forcing myself to walk slowly, heels clicking on the marble floor, echoing like tiny gunshots. The music rose again, the laughter resumed, and the room swallowed the moment as if it had never happened. Outside, winter air rushed against my face, sharp and metallic. My breath fogged at the night as I stood under the awning of the lavish hotel, the muffled sound of celebration bleeding through the glass doors. I could still hear him laughing inside, his voice proud and loud, performing for the same people who'd just witnessed him destroy me in front of them. The parking lot lights reflected on my car, a faded blue Honda Civic, its paint chipped and dull. He'd mocked it before, too. "You really drive that thing," he'd once said, laughing. "I'd rather walk." I sat behind the wheel, hands shaking, heart heavy. For a long moment I didn't start the car. I just stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, messy hair, trembling chin eyes that looked older than 28. I hated that he'd gotten to me. Hated that he'd reduced years of struggle into a single public humiliation. But beneath that pain, something else stirred. Something fierce and quiet. Golden Arc. That was the name of my startup, a small fintech company I'd founded 2 years earlier, trying to build decentralized finance tools for small business owners. Everyone laughed at me when I started it. Blockchain, crypto, DeFi. It all sounded like gibberish to them. "It's not real money," my father said. "You're wasting your time." My brother had called it your hobby. But to me it wasn't a hobby. It was freedom. I looked up at the glittering city skyline, thinking of the investors who'd turned me down, the sleepless nights writing code in a studio apartment with flickering lights, the constant fight to be taken seriously in rooms filled with men who spoke over me. Every insult, every dismissal, every closed door, they had all brought me here. Nathan thought I was broke. He wasn't wrong, not financially, but he was blind. He couldn't see what I was building, what I was becoming. The car heater wheezed to life, blowing warmth into the frozen air. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, letting the hum steady my breath. Somewhere deep inside, a small spark of calm began to grow. "You're too broke," he'd said. Maybe I was. But he'd never understood what real wealth meant, the kind that couldn't be measured in wedding venues or Rolexes or guest lists. I started the car and pulled out of the lot, the city lights flickering on the wet pavement like golden threads. At a red light, I looked up at the reflection of the hotel's glowing facade. It shimmered on my windshield, distorted by raindrops like a world I used to belong to, but didn't anymore. For a brief second, I almost turned back to confront him, to say something, cutting something that would make him regret those words. But then I realized the truth. Revenge wasn't something you said. It was something you became. As I drove toward the edge of the city, a faint glow broke through the clouds. The kind of light you only notice when you've been living in the dark too long. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air sting my face, and whispered to the night, "One day you'll regret this, Nathan. One day the world will know my name before you do." I didn't know then how that would happen, how that night would become the spark that changed everything. But I knew this: I wouldn't chase their approval anymore. I'd build something so undeniable they couldn't ignore it. Revenge wouldn't come through shouting or tears. It would come through silent success and the kind of gold you couldn't buy. And someday soon, the name Lydia Harper would shine brighter than the chandelier that tried to bury me in its light. The morning after the wedding, I woke to a room filled with silence and half-unpacked boxes. My dress from the night before lay crumpled over a chair, its fabric still smelling faintly of spilled champagne and humiliation. My phone blinked with notifications, photos from the wedding circulating on social media, perfectly filtered moments, where everyone smiled. In none of them was I visible. It was as if I'd never been there at all. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my face pale, eyes rimmed with red. The words "you're too broke" echoed again, louder in the quiet. For a long time I just stood there, toothbrush in hand, wondering why his voice still had that kind of power over me. Then I remembered the last real conversation we'd had before everything fell apart. It was 3 years ago in my parents' kitchen, before Golden Ark was even a name. I had told him my idea, creating a transparent, decentralized platform to help small investors track financial growth in real time, powered by blockchain. Nathan laughed so hard he spilled his coffee. "You build a finance company," he smirked. "Lydia, you couldn't even finish your MBA. "I didn't finish it because I didn't want it," I had said. "I wanted something different." "Different doesn't pay the bills," he'd replied. "You should get a stable job. Maybe start small. Work for someone who knows what they're doing." That day, I learned the difference between doubt and disdain. Now, standing in my tiny apartment, I made myself a promise: if they wanted to underestimate me, I'd let them, but I would make that underestimation cost them dearly. By 8 a.m., I was at the co-working space downtown, the one I shared with 3 other founders who lived on caffeine and desperation. My corner desk was cluttered with sticky notes, half-empty coffee cups, and printouts, filled with scribbles and algorithms. Ruth Golden, my co-founder and the only person who had believed in me from day one, looked up from her laptop as I walked in. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. "I didn't." She raised an eyebrow. "Wedding?" "Yeah," I said, sinking into the chair beside her. My brother made sure it was unforgettable. She didn't press for details. That was one of the things I loved about Ruth. She had this quiet strength, this understanding that pain didn't always need to be explained. Instead, she just slid a coffee toward me and said, "Then let's make today count." We spent the next 6 hours buried in code, refining the smart contract architecture that would eventually make Golden Ark different from every other DeFi startup. Most people thought decentralized finance was all hype, a playground for crypto bros. But we wanted to make it accessible, real human. For single mothers, retirees, anyone tired of gatekeepers deciding their worth. By noon, we'd hit a wall. The simulation kept crashing, a single line of error code looping like a taunt. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. "We're missing something," I muttered. Maybe it's not the system, Ruth said softly. Maybe it's the story. I frowned. What do you mean? People don't buy into systems, Lydia. They buy into stories. They need to see themselves in what we're building. Her words sank deep. She was right. Golden Ark wasn't about math. It was about dignity. That afternoon, while Ruth fixed the back-end issue, I started rewriting our pitch deck. Not for investors, not yet, but for me. I wanted to see in writing what I was fighting for. When I finished, I read it out loud, my voice trembling. Golden Ark exists to give people the power to own their value, to be seen even when the world calls them broke. It wasn't just a pitch. It was a manifesto. By evening, the space had emptied out. Ruth packed her things, glancing over at me. You sure you're okay? I smiled faintly. I will be. She hesitated. You know, someday he'll regret those words. I don't want him to regret them, I said. I just want him to hear them again and realize who he said them to. After she left, I stayed late. The only sound was the hum of computers and distant traffic. I opened my browser and clicked on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Scrolling through the names, I felt a flicker of envy but also fire. I wanted to see Golden Ark there one day. Not for the fame, but because it would mean the world had finally seen what Nathan couldn't. At midnight, I stepped out into the empty street. The neon glow from the cafe across the road reflected off wet asphalt, painting streaks of gold that looked almost deliberate, almost hopeful. My reflection shimmered in the puddles, tired but unbroken. For the first time since that night, I smiled. I didn't know it yet, but that same week our prototype would catch the attention of a silent investor. The kind of opportunity that starts small and changes everything. And one day soon, when my brother opened his glossy business magazines over his morning coffee, he would see my name not buried in an article, not as a footnote, but on the cover. He would remember that wedding those words and understand that the only thing broke about me was the part that never needed his approval. The first real investor meeting for Golden Ark took place in a coffee shop that smelled faintly of burnt espresso and ambition. The place wasn't glamorous, just cracked leather booths, a flickering neon sign, and the kind of crowd that pretended to work while watching everyone else. But for me, it felt like the beginning of something real. Ruth sat across from me, straight-backed, her laptop open to the presentation we'd spent nights perfecting. She looked calm, but I could see her thumb tapping against the side of her coffee cup, her tell of nerves. "Do you think he's actually coming?" she whispered. "He confirmed twice," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was reassuring her or myself. His name was Mr. Dalton Reeves, a mid-level angel investor rumored to have connections in the fintech world. He'd made early bets on small DeFi startups that turned into quiet powerhouses. The kind of man who didn't waste time. The kind of man who could change everything. When the door chimed, we both looked up. Dalton Reeves was taller than I expected, early 50s, silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, then joined us without introduction. "You're Lydia Harper," he said, glancing at his phone. "And this must be your partner." "Ruth Golden," she said quickly, offering her hand. He didn't shake it. Instead, he studied the slides on her screen. "You've got 5 minutes. Impress me." 5 minutes. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. Golden Ark is a decentralized finance platform designed to give small investors transparency, autonomy, and trust, everything traditional banks fail to provide. Dalton's expression didn't change. "I've heard that before." I nodded. "But you haven't heard it from me." That earned a flicker of interest. I explained how our platform used hybrid blockchain architecture to allow real-time asset tracking without the usual volatility. How every transaction was backed by a verifiable audit trail. How it could empower people who'd been shut out of the financial system, mothers, freelancers, retirees, people like my own family once was. Ruth added softly, "We're not trying to replace banks. We're trying to restore trust." Dalton leaned back. "You talk like someone who's been burned." "I have," I said, "by people who thought worth could only be measured in money." Something shifted in his eyes. He looked at me longer this time, then closed the laptop gently. "Your tech is solid, but your name, Golden Ark. Why, Ruth and I exchanged a glance. I took a breath. Because gold doesn't rust. It bends, it changes, but it never loses its value. And because lifelike success rarely moves in a straight line. Dalton smiled faintly. Poetic. He slid a card across the table. Send me your full proposal. And one more thing, make sure you're ready for what comes after people start saying yes. When he left, Ruth exhaled so loudly the barista turned. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes either. But he didn't say no, she repeated, grinning. I smiled, though I didn't let myself hope too much. Hope had cost me before. 2 weeks later, Dalton Reeves emailed us with an offer. A small investment, $50,000 in exchange for 10% equity. It wasn't the kind of money that made headlines, but it was enough to move us from idea to prototype. I signed the contract with shaking hands, my signature looping over the paper like a promise to my future self. The next few months were a blur. Long nights, endless testing, cold takeout eaten over glowing screens. Ruth and I built, broke, rebuilt. Every time I thought I couldn't push further, I remembered Nathan's voice at that wedding. You don't belong here. Those words became my fuel. We launched the beta, quietly inviting only 100 users, small business owners, freelancers, single parents. Within a week, word spread. Our feedback inbox filled faster than we could read it. People were finally seeing what we saw. One email stood out from the rest. I don't understand how it all works, but for the first time I can see exactly where my money goes. Thank you. I read it twice, then 3 times. I didn't realize I was crying until Ruth handed me a tissue without saying anything. By spring, Golden Ark had crossed 10,000 users. By summer, 30,000. We were still small compared to the giants, but the world had begun to whisper our name. Forbes Techline and a handful of DeFi publications ran short pieces calling us the women redefining financial trust. My phone buzzed one morning with a text from an unknown number. Heard you made Forbes digital. Nathan. I stared at it for a full minute. No apology, no emotion, just acknowledgement. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my phone, turned back to my screen, and smiled. Let him watch from the sidelines, I said quietly. Ruth looked up. What? Nothing, I said. Just thinking about how poetic justice usually arrives in lowercase letters. That night I stayed late in the office again. The city outside was glowing gold under the setting sun, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I felt infinite. Golden Ark wasn't just a company anymore. It was proof that every cruel word, every closed door, every humiliation had a purpose. I leaned back, watching the light fade over the skyline. Revenge didn't look like triumph. It looked like peace. And I promised myself when the time came, I wouldn't need to tell Nathan what I'd become. The world would tell him for me. The first time I saw my family again after the wedding was 2 years later at my father's birthday dinner. The invitation arrived in the mail, thick ivory cardstock with embossed gold lettering, traditional, pretentious, unmistakably my mother's doing. Inside there was a handwritten note. Your father would love to see you. Please come, Lydia. Let's put the past behind us. I almost threw it away. But curiosity, dangerous, familiar curiosity, got the better of me. By then, Golden Ark had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We'd secured Series A funding, partnered with 2 international firms, and been featured in a Forbes article titled, The Women Building the Future of Finance. Our user base had crossed 100,000. My days blurred between investor calls, development sprints, and interviews. My nights were quieter, lonelier, but filled with the satisfaction of creating something that mattered. Still, part of me wanted my father to know. To see me not as a disappointment, but as someone who'd survived without his approval. The restaurant they chose was the same one Nathan had taken his wedding photos in: gold chandeliers, marble floors, the kind of place that charged extra for confidence. When I arrived, the hostess gave me a polite smile. The Harper party. They're expecting you, Ms. Harper. The sound of Ms. instead of Miss made me stand a little taller. They were seated at a round table near the center of the room, of course perfect visibility. My father looked older but still proud. My mother's diamonds sparkled like small practiced apologies. Nathan sat beside his wife Vanessa, who was scrolling through her phone pretending to listen. "Lydia," my mother said as I approached. "You look different." "I've been busy," I replied, sliding into my seat. "Still doing that online money thing?" Nathan asked, swirling his wine. "It's called blockchain technology," I said evenly. He smirked. "Right. The thing everyone thought was a fad." I took a sip of water. Funny thing about fads, they tend to outlast predictions. Vanessa looked up. "Oh, I read about that. Something called Golden Arc." Nathan's head snapped toward her. Wait, what? I met his eyes. "Yes, that's mine." The table went silent. My father cleared his throat. "Your company's doing well, I hear." "Well enough," I said. My mother leaned in slightly, her voice soft. "Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped." I smiled faintly. "You already did." She frowned, not understanding, but my father did. His eyes narrowed, then softened with something like reluctant respect. The waiter arrived, saving us from the weight of the silence. We ordered, and small talk filled the spaces between courses. My father discussed property, my mother spoke about charity events. Vanessa complimented the wine. Nathan, for once, was quiet. Until dessert. "So Forbes, huh?" he said finally. "Guess that means you're doing all right." "I am," I said. He leaned back, smirking again, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You know, if you ever need help scaling my company, don't," I said quickly. His smirk faltered. "I was just offering." "I'm sure you were." My mother gave a small, nervous laugh. "Oh, Nathan, leave your sister alone." But it was too late. Something in the air had shifted. The same condescension I'd endured all my life was creeping back, and I wasn't going to let it. I set down my fork. "Do you remember what you said to me at your wedding?" Nathan's smile froze. "I say a lot of things." "You told me to leave my gift and go," I said quietly. "You said you were ashamed to have me as a sister." The table went still. Even the waiter approaching with coffee paused mid-step. Nathan's jaw tightened. "You're really going to bring that up now?" "Why not?" I said. "You humiliated me in front of 200 people. He looked around, suddenly aware of the eyes watching us. "I was drunk." "You're still holding on to that." "I'm not holding on to it," I said. "I'm just remembering it." "There's a difference." My father exhaled. "Enough. This isn't the place." "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's exactly the place. Because this," I gestured around the polished room, the perfect table, the strained smiles, "this is where it all happened. Pretending, performing, and pretending again." Nathan's eyes darkened. "You think you're better than us now?" I met his gaze without blinking. "No, I just think I finally stopped needing your approval." For a moment, nobody moved. Then my father said quietly, "She's right, Nathan." Nathan turned to him in disbelief. "Dad?" "She built something real," my father said. "You should respect that." The silence that followed was heavier than any applause I could have imagined. I picked up my purse and stood. "Thank you for dinner. And happy birthday, Dad." As I walked toward the exit, I felt my brother's eyes on me, hot with resentment. But I didn't look back. Outside, the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, glowing gold under the drizzle. I exhaled the cold air, clearing the last of the bitterness from my chest. That night I understood something new. Revenge wasn't a single act, it was a process. Sometimes it happened quietly over years, unfolding like the arc of something golden and unstoppable. And Nathan, he had no idea that his reckoning hadn't even begun. The first time I walked into Reeves Capital's headquarters, I wasn't the same woman who had stood outside that wedding hall 2 years earlier. Back then, I had been raw emotion hurt and hunger wrapped in defiance. Now I was precise, confidence disguised in calm. Dalton Reeves had called me 3 days after my father's birthday dinner. "Lydia," he said over the phone, "I have someone you need to meet, a major investor. He's looking for partnerships in blockchain-based finance. He's old money but smart enough to see where the world's headed. Wear something that says you don't need him, but he'll regret not needing you." I laughed, but he wasn't joking. The Reeves Capital office was everything you'd expect from a firm that moved billions, marble floors, towering glass walls, art that screamed understatement. The receptionist smiled like she'd practiced in a mirror. "Ms. Harper, they're expecting you in the conference room." Inside the table gleamed like a mirror. Dalton sat at the head, his silver hair catching the morning light. Beside him were two men in tailored suits, one I recognized immediately. Nathan. My heartbeat stuttered. He was seated across from Dalton, a golden pen between his fingers, his wedding ring glinting under the light. He looked up and for a second pure disbelief flickered across his face. Lydia Dalton's eyes darted between us, mildly curious. "You two know each other?" "Family," I said, keeping my tone even. Nathan's lips tightened. "My sister." "Well," Dalton said, clearly amused. "Small world. Lydia here is the founder of Golden Ark." Nathan blinked. "The Golden Ark?" "The DeFi company that's been all over Forbes," I smiled. "The very same." For once he had no words. Dalton continued smoothly. "We're exploring a joint venture. Reeves Capital is considering a strategic partnership to scale Golden Ark internationally. Nathan's firm manages part of our portfolio." I turned to my brother. "So you're handling blockchain investments now?" He coughed lightly. "Some. It's a growing sector." "Interesting," I said. "You told me once it was all a fad." Dalton chuckled, clearly sensing the tension. "Well, Lydia's proved it's anything but." The next hour blurred into figures, projections, and questions. I spoke with the authority of someone who'd built her own empire, brick by digital brick. Nathan tried to keep up, throwing in comments that sounded rehearsed, half jargon, half desperation to reassert control. But the real moment came when Dalton slid a document toward me. "We're considering appointing you as strategic advisor for our upcoming fund, the Golden Portfolio, a DeFi-focused venture. You'd oversee compliance, innovation, and onboarding." Nathan's hand froze mid-note. "Wait, you're offering her an advisory role?" Dalton raised an eyebrow. "You sound surprised?" "She's my sister," Nathan said, almost defensive. "She's new to this level of finance." I turned to him, smiting thinly. "Funny. I thought you'd be proud." Dalton's tone cooled. "Mr. Harper, Ms. Harper, is one of the leading innovators in decentralized trust systems. Reeves Capital doesn't hire families, we hire results." Silence. Nathan's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. When the meeting ended, Dalton shook my hand warmly. "You'll receive the proposal by Monday. Excellent work today, Lydia." As he left, Nathan lingered behind. His voice was low, almost trembling. "You could have told me. Told you that you'd made it. That you were working with Reeves." I tilted my head. "You told me once to leave the gift and go." "I just followed instructions." His expression faltered. "I didn't mean yes," I said softly. "You did. And that's okay. It made me stronger." He exhaled the weight of old arrogance slipping into uncertainty. "Lydia, I was wrong. I know. Can we start over?" I studied him for a long moment. The same man who once humiliated me now stood small in a glass tower built on borrowed power. "Maybe someday," I said. "But not today." Outside, the sun blazed against the mirrored windows, turning the entire facade gold. As I stepped onto the street, my reflection shimmered beside the buildings, two versions of me, past and present, merging for the first time. My phone buzzed, a notification from Forbes. "Breaking Golden Ark founder Lydia Harper joins Reeves Capital as strategic advisor for DeFi expansion." I stared at the headline, a strange calm washing over me. He called me broke once. Now the company he worked for was about to depend on mine. Later that night, Ruth texted me a single line. "How did it go?" I sent her a photo of the skyline glowing in gold. "Let's just say," I replied, "the tables turned faster than I expected." Then I looked up at the city, the glass, the steel, the pulse of ambition, and whispered to the night, "You see that, Nathan? This is what broke looks like when it becomes unbreakable." Some victories don't need applause. They just need silence loud enough for the world to hear. I didn't expect the cover to hit me the way it did. For months, I'd been too busy to think about press interviews, panels, speaking invitations. I'd said no to most of them. But when Forbes called again this time for their annual Women in Business, the New Power Generation issue, Dalton said, "You need to do this one, Lydia. Not for the ego, for the message." So I did. I sat in a studio under hot lights while they adjusted my hair, my posture, the tilt of my chin. They asked me about GoldenArk, about blockchain, about what it meant to build a company from nothing. But when the photographer asked, "Can you give me your power look?" I just smiled softly. "This is my power look," I said. Calm, not cold. Weeks passed. I forgot about it. Until the morning, Dalton's assistant burst into my office holding a glossy magazine like it was gold itself. "Ms. Harper," she said breathlessly, "it's out." There I was on the cover. My reflection stared back at me, confident, composed, standing against a skyline washed in sunrise. The headline read, "Lydia Harper, the woman redefining trust." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The air around me felt still heavy, as if time had folded in on itself. Every sleepless night, every humiliation, every time someone called me foolish or naive, all of it was right there reflected in that single glossy image. "Send copies to the team," I said finally. "And one to Dalton." I didn't think about Nathan. Not yet. That afternoon I had back-to-back meetings at Reeves Capital. The glass conference room glowed with sunlight as Dalton and I discussed the final steps for launching the Golden Portfolio. Across the table, Nathan was already seated, flipping through his phone like he owned the place. Dalton handed him a folder. "You'll want to see this," he said. Nathan glanced at the folder, then froze. The magazine slipped from his hand onto the glass table with a dull thud. There it was, my face staring back at him, confident and calm under the Forbes masthead. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dalton smiled slightly. "Impressive, isn't it? Lydia's making history. We're lucky to have her advising our fund." Nathan's fingers twitched as he picked up the magazine again, flipping through pages that detailed my story. How I'd started GoldenArk from scratch. How I'd fought for recognition in a male-dominated industry. How our platform now served over 1 million users worldwide. Every paragraph was a mirror he couldn't look away from. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. His voice finally cracked through the silence. I didn't realize you were this successful." I met his eyes evenly. "You didn't ask." He swallowed, looking between Dalton and me, searching for something to hold on to. I read about GoldenArk's expansion," he said weakly. "You've done well." Dalton leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the show. "Well enough that your firm might want to reconsider its DeFi strategy. Lydia's platform is setting industry standards." Nathan nodded absently, still staring at the article. His face had gone pale. It was the exact look I remembered from the wedding, only now the roles were reversed. After the meeting, Dalton pulled me aside. "You handled that well." "I didn't do anything I said." "Exactly," he replied. "That's what power looks like." Later that night, I walked through the quiet halls of GoldenArk's headquarters. The office lights glowed softly against the glass walls, reflecting fragments of my team working, late developers, analysts, dreamers. We'd built this, together, from nothing. I stopped by the front desk where a stack of Forbes issues had already arrived. I picked one up, running my fingers over the cover. It still didn't feel real. My phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. I saw the magazine. "Proud of you, Nathan." For a long moment I stared at it. Then I typed back, "Thank you." And nothing more. I didn't need an apology. Not anymore. His silence back then had been the catalyst. His cruelty had built my resilience. Every insult had become brick and mortar for what I'd created. The next morning, our social media feeds exploded. Messages from women around the world flooded in: entrepreneurs, single mothers, students. "You make me believe I can start over." "I showed my daughter your story. She wants to build her own app now." Those meant more to me than any headline ever could. At sunset, I stood by the window of my office, the city glowing gold beneath me. I pulled the magazine from my bag one last time and placed it on the shelf beside a small velvet box, the same box I'd once left on a wedding table. The pendant inside still read, "Always family." But now I understood something new. Sometimes family isn't where you come from. It's what you build when the world says you can't. Behind me, the office door opened softly. Ruth's voice was gentle. They're ready for you in the studio. We're shooting the campaign video. I turned, smiling. Let's make it shine. As we walked down the hall, I caught one last glimpse of the magazine's reflection in the glass, the woman redefining trust. And for the first time, I believed it. The morning after the Forbes issue hit newsstands, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails from investors, messages from journalists, congratulations from people I hadn't heard from in years. Every notification felt like a small spark of vindication. The world was finally seeing what I'd built, what I'd fought for when everyone else called me foolish. By noon, I was in back-to-back interviews. CNN wanted a quote about women breaking barriers in fintech. Bloomberg requested a feature on blockchain's social impact. My assistant Jordan joked that I'd officially become a walking headline. But none of that compared to what happened that evening. Dalton invited me to a private reception at the Metropolitan Hotel, a gathering of investors and CEOs. It's informal, he'd said, but strategic. Be ready to talk business. And image matters, Lydia. Tonight you're not just a founder. You're the future. I arrived in a black silk jumpsuit, hair pulled back, confidence sharp as glass. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers filled with the hum of expensive laughter. Waiters glided by with trays of champagne, and the scent of jasmine and money hung in the air. Dalton greeted me with a proud smile. You made quite the splash this week, he said. Half the room wants to meet you. The other half wishes they'd invested earlier. I laughed softly. Then let's not keep them waiting. He nodded toward the far end of the room. There's someone here you might want to see first. I followed his gaze and froze. Nathan stood near the bar holding a glass of scotch, talking animatedly with two men I recognized from Reeves Capital's partner network. He hadn't seen me yet. The sight of him there in my world sent a strange ripple through me. Not anger, not even pride. Just a quiet awareness that the balance had shifted completely. Dalton murmured, "Funny how karma doesn't need an invitation." I smiled faintly. It always finds its way. As I approached, Nathan's conversation trailed off. His eyes found me widening slightly before he composed himself. Lydia, he said, as if we'd simply run into each other at a grocery store. Didn't expect to see you here. Really, I said. I helped organize it. The men beside him turned surprised. You're Lydia Harper? One of them asked. The Forbes feature. I nodded. That's me. They both began congratulating me, showering me with compliments about Golden Ark's impact. Nathan stood awkwardly smiling, frozen, realizing he was now the least important person in the conversation. Actually, one of the men said we were just discussing possible collaboration with Reeves Capital's blockchain team. Maybe Golden Ark could provide infrastructure support. I tilted my head. Infrastructure support? Or strategic leadership? The man laughed. Well, I'd say leadership, of course. I could feel Nathan's discomfort thick in the air. His grip on the glass tightened, his voice strained. Golden Ark's doing great things, he said. I'm proud of her success. I met his eyes, steady and cool. Thank you. It means more than you know. Dalton joined us then, smoothly changing the tone. Gentlemen, Ms. Harper's about to keynote the Global FinTech Summit next month. You'll be hearing a lot more from her. Lydia, we're due to meet the Reeves partners in 5. As he guided me away, I heard Nathan mutter something under his breath, something between envy and regret. When we reached the balcony overlooking the glittering city, Dalton handed me a glass of champagne. How does it feel? He asked. I thought about it. Strange, I admitted. It's not the revenge I imagined. That's because real revenge doesn't scream, Dalton said. It just stands there calm, undeniable, impossible to ignore. We clinked glasses. An hour later, after speeches and handshakes, I found myself alone by the window. The city lights stretched out like golden circuitry, a map of everything I'd built. Behind me, the sound of conversation blurred into a low hum. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment not as triumph, but as arrival. Then I heard his voice. Lydia. Nathan stood a few feet away, no scotch in hand now, just uncertainty. The confident mask was gone. I need to say something, he began. Back then at the wedding I was cruel. I thought I was protecting our image. But the truth is, I was jealous. You were brave enough to walk away from the life I was too afraid to question. I studied him carefully. It took you 3 years to say that. I know, he said quietly. But I'm saying it now. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just distance, a gentle kind of understanding. I don't hate you, Nathan, I said softly. You did what everyone expected you to do. I just stopped doing that. He nodded slowly. I don't deserve forgiveness. It's not about deserving, I said. It's about learning. He looked away, eyes shining faintly. I'm happy for you, Lydia. Really. I believed him. And that was enough. When I left the ballroom that night, the city was drenched in gold light. My reflection caught in the glass doors, calm, certain, free. I wasn't the girl they'd called broke anymore. I wasn't even the woman who wanted revenge. I was something else entirely. And from that night on, I knew the tables hadn't just turned. I'd built a new table altogether. The weeks after the Forbes cover were a storm of motion and meaning. GoldenArc's growth exploded. Our user base tripled. Investors I'd chased for years were suddenly chasing me. But behind the numbers, something deeper was happening. Our idea was finally understood. What had started as a dream in a shared workspace had become a movement. Every morning I walked into our headquarters, the entire top floor of a building in downtown Manhattan, sunlight flooding through floor-to-ceiling windows. The GoldenArc logo shimmered in brushed gold on the wall. The tagline beneath it, simple and defiant, own your worth. Ruth was there before me most days, hair in a messy bun, already surrounded by screens and charts. We just passed 2 million users, she said one morning, her eyes sparkling. And the new DeFi education program is live. The feedback's incredible. I smiled. We built something real, Ruth. No, she said, shaking her head. You did. I just believed early. We were interrupted by my assistant Jordan holding a tablet. You're trending again, he said, half laughing, half out of breath. Trending for what? He grinned. Your interview clip, the one where you said, I wasn't born rich. I am rich. It's everywhere. I rolled my eyes. That's not even what I meant. Doesn't matter. They love it. The world was suddenly obsessed with GoldenArc with me. News anchors called me the Golden Woman of blockchain. Commentators argued about whether I was a visionary or just lucky. My inbox overflowed with speaking invitations, podcasts, collaborations. For the first time, I had to say no to opportunity. And yet with every headline, I felt something tug quietly inside me, a question that wouldn't leave. Was this success, or just noise Dalton called late one evening? You're becoming a symbol, he said. That's good for business, but dangerous for peace of mind. I didn't build this to be famous, I said. I know, he replied. That's why you'll survive it. That weekend, I attended the Global FinTech Summit as keynote speaker. Thousands of people filled the grand hall. CEOs, founders, students, reporters. When I stepped on stage, the applause hit like a wave. The spotlight was warm on my face. 5 years ago, someone told me I was too broke to belong. And they were right, I didn't belong. Not in their world. I was building my own. The audience fell silent. Every word carried the weight of those years, the failures, the nights spent working until dawn, the humiliation that became fuel. GoldenArc isn't about money, I continued. It's about value. About proving that trust can exist without permission. That freedom can be coded, not bought. That wealth isn't a privilege, it's a right you earn by believing in yourself when no one else does. The crowd rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Ruth stood in the front row, clapping hard, eyes shining. Afterward, journalists swarmed. One asked Lydia, "Do you think your success is proof that women can dominate DeFi and blockchain?" I smiled. It's proof that women already do. We just stopped asking for permission to be seen. That night, GoldenArc's servers nearly crashed under new registrations. Dalton texted me one line. You didn't just give a speech. You started a revolution. The days that followed blurred into strategy meetings, calls with governments, and partnership offers. We were no longer just a company, we were building financial tools for people who'd never been seen by the system. Then came the unexpected call from a global tech conglomerate offering a merger. The deal was massive, life-changing money, international reach. But something inside me hesitated. Ruth noticed. "You're not excited," she said. "It's not that," I admitted. "It's just, we built Golden Ark to give people control of their value. If we sell it, we lose that." She nodded slowly. "Then don't." I met her gaze. "Even if it means turning down everything," she smiled. "You already have everything that matters." I stayed up all night in the office staring out at the city lights reflected on the Hudson. Somewhere below, life pulsed. The same city that had once swallowed me whole now shimmered in my reflection. In the quiet, I thought of Nathan. I hadn't heard from him since that night at the gala. But somehow I knew he was watching, reading the articles, seeing the photos, realizing that the sister he'd dismissed had built something unstoppable. And for the first time, I didn't need that thought to hurt. It just was. As dawn broke, sunlight spilled across my desk, painting everything gold. I opened my laptop and drafted an announcement. Golden Ark remains independent. Our mission isn't for sale. By noon, the post had gone viral. Comments poured in from entrepreneurs, from mothers, from people who finally felt seen. I walked to the window again, the morning wind brushing against the glass, carrying the sound of a city that had doubted me once. This time it sounded like applause. And I realized this was bigger than revenge, bigger than family, bigger even than success. Golden Ark wasn't just my company. It was my legacy in motion, a living, breathing proof that the world could be rebuilt by those it tried to break. The envelope came on a Thursday morning, hand-delivered to my office. Thick ivory paper sealed with gold wax, stamped with an ornate H. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. My mother's handwriting curled across the front in elegant loops, Ms. Lydia Harper. For a moment, I just stared at it. It felt heavier than paper, like the weight of a past I'd already buried. Ruth walked by, coffee in hand. "What's that?" I turned it over in my fingers. "An invitation." She smirked. "Wedding or guilt?" I smiled faintly. Maybe both. When I finally broke the seal, a puff of floral perfume drifted up, the kind my mother wore, old world roses and control. The card inside read, "You are cordially invited to celebrate the renewal of vows between Nathan and Vanessa Harper at the Westbrook Country Estate." There was no note, no apology, no mention of the years that had passed. Just a date and a time. I laughed quietly. Ruth raised an eyebrow. "You're not going." I didn't answer. All day the invitation sat on the corner of my desk, its gold lettering glinting under the office lights like a dare. By evening, I'd convinced myself I wasn't even thinking about it, which of course meant I couldn't think of anything else. That night, as the city hummed beneath my penthouse window, I found myself replaying that long-ago scene, Nathan's wedding, the words that burned me alive. "You're too broke. Leave the gift and go." I had left, and he had laughed. Now the tables had turned. But why did it still ache? Dalton called later that evening. "You sound restless," he said, "always reading me too well." "I got an invitation." He chuckled. "Let me guess. Family renewal of vows." "Ah," he said dryly. "The great PR ceremony of forgiveness. Are you going?" "I don't know." He was silent for a beat. "Then here's my advice. Don't go to make a point. Go if you've already made it." That line stayed with me long after the call ended. 2 weeks later, I drove to Westbrook Estate. I told myself it was for closure, but deep down, I knew it was for peace. The estate was exactly as I remembered: manicured lawns, fountains that looked expensive but unnecessary, and people who dressed like they lived in catalogs. The event was extravagant: string quartet by the Lake Champlain pyramids under white tents, everything staged for perfection. I parked discreetly near the edge of the lot, not wanting the attention of arriving in my Tesla. the one everyone now associated with the Forbes cover woman. When I walked into the courtyard, conversations stuttered mid-sentence. Heads turned. I could feel the hum ripple through the crowd like a breeze through glass. "That's her," someone whispered. "Lydia Harper." Vanessa saw me first. Her surprise was brief before she smiled that polished hostess smile. "Lydia, how wonderful to see you." Her tone was bright, but her eyes flicked nervously toward the cameras. "Congratulations," I said smoothly. "You both look committed." Nathan appeared behind her, the same confident smile he'd worn on his wedding day, though there was a tightness around his eyes now, the kind that came from years of keeping up appearances. "Lydia," he said softly, "you came." "I did." He gestured toward the tables, the sea of white and gold. "We're about to start dinner. Join us." I hesitated. "Wouldn't want to make things awkward." "Lydia," he said, lowering his voice, "please." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard. For the first time in years, it didn't sound rehearsed. I followed them to the head table where my parents sat. My mother's eyes widened slightly as I approached, then softened with a mixture of pride and regret. "Lydia," she said quietly, "you look beautiful." "Thank you," I said. My father gave a curt nod. I read the article. "Impressive work." "Appreciate it," I replied, my voice even. Dinner was served. Conversations swelled around us, polite practice full of laughter that never reached the eyes. I sat quietly observing. Nathan was charming as always, though a little too polished now. Vanessa clung to his arm, smiling for photographers who circled like bees around sugar. Halfway through dessert, the MC took the microphone. "Before we continue, I'd like to thank a very special guest who's joined us tonight. You may know her from Forbes, from Golden Arc, or simply as Nathan's sister." I froze. Nathan looked at me, eyes, soft voice almost breaking. "Lydia," he said into the mic, "I want to say something." The crowd turned. Cameras flashed. He took a deep breath. "Years ago, I said words that I can't take back. I hurt you, and I've lived with that regret ever since. But tonight, standing here with my wife, my family, and everyone I care about, I want to tell you I'm proud of you. You didn't just prove me wrong. You taught me what success really looks like." The crowd applauded, polite and unsure. I felt every eye on me. For a heartbeat, the old pain flickered. But then I realized this wasn't revenge anymore. It was released. I stood, my voice steady. "Thank you, Nathan. I've learned something too. Forgiveness doesn't always mean forgetting. It just means we stop carrying what was never ours to hold." The room was silent, the words hanging in the air like a soft kind of truth. Nathan's eyes glistened. He nodded, and for the first time since we were children, he looked like my brother again. I sat back down, the tension in my chest unraveling, the applause gentle but real. Outside, the night stretched open, quiet, and gold. And I knew then the story that began with shame was finally finding its ending in grace. The night after Nathan's vow renewal, I sat awake in my penthouse watching the city glow beneath me. I should have felt satisfied, maybe even triumphant. I'd faced my brother, heard his public apology, and walked away without anger. But instead, I felt something else quiet. The kind that settles in when a war finally ends and you realize you're still standing on the battlefield. Ruth called the next morning. "You sound strange," she said. "Do I like you finally finished a chapter you weren't ready to stop writing?" I smiled faintly. Maybe I did. There was a pause, then her voice softened. "So what now?" That was the question I couldn't escape. Golden Arc was thriving beyond expectation. We'd just reached 5 million users and closed our second funding round at a valuation I could barely comprehend. The company had grown into a global platform, a network empowering small investors, women, and independent entrepreneurs to build wealth on their own terms. But even with the success, something inside me whispered, this can't be where it ends. Later that afternoon, I walked through our office, the hum of keyboards, and the quiet rhythm of focused ambition filling the air. The team was preparing to roll out Golden Arc's new DeFi Learning Hub, an educational initiative for older women entering the digital economy. "We're calling it the Golden Foundation," Ruth had said when she pitched it. "Because we're not just changing markets, we're changing mindsets." The idea stayed with me. That night, I reviewed the numbers, the outreach plans, the partnerships with nonprofits. For the first time, the project felt bigger than business. It felt like purpose. By dawn, I made a decision. Golden Arc would invest $20 million to launch the Golden Foundation, a free global education initiative to teach financial literacy, blockchain understanding, and digital independence to women over 50. The press release went out that morning. Within hours, it was everywhere. Harper's new mission empowering women through blockchain. The billion-dollar founder who refuses to forget her roots. My inbox flooded again, but this time the messages felt different. One was from a retired nurse in Ohio. I never understood crypto before. My grandkids told me about your foundation. Thank you for making me feel like it's not too late to learn. Another from a single mother in Texas. Your platform helped me pay off debt and start saving again. I thought women my age were invisible in tech, but not anymore. I sat in my office reading each one until the sunlight poured across my desk. They weren't just messages. They were reminders that the legacy I was building wasn't gold, it was a connection. Dalton stopped by that afternoon. You've created a movement, he said, glancing at the articles on my screen. Do you realize what this means? I do, I said quietly. But it's not about me anymore. He smiled. That's when you know you've really won. We spent hours reviewing partnership proposals from universities and tech firms. The momentum was unstoppable, but what moved me most wasn't the funding offers or headlines. It was the thought of those women somewhere out there sitting at their kitchen tables finally believing they could own their future. That evening, I attended a charity gala in Tribeca. The event raised money for women entrepreneurs, and the Golden Foundation was being honored for its contribution. As I took the stage, the audience rose in applause. I used to think success was about proving people wrong, I began. Now I know it's about proving people right. Proving that those who believed in you were never wasting their faith. I paused, scanning the room. When my brother told me I was too broke to belong, I believed him for a while. But what he didn't understand was that broken doesn't mean finished. It means ready to rebuild, to rise, to redefine. The crowd went silent, hanging on every word. So tonight, this isn't about revenge, I said. It's about revolution. The kind built not on wealth, but on worth. When the applause came, it was thunderous. But the real moment came afterward when a woman in her 60s approached me, her hands trembling as she clasped mine. You gave me back my dignity, she said, tears in her eyes. I didn't think I could learn something new at my age. But I did. Because you made me believe I could. I hugged her. No cameras, no performance, just truth. Driving home later, I looked out over the skyline. Every window shimmered like a pixel of light, a digital constellation built from millions of lives crossing paths. Somewhere down there, I thought was the next woman who'd refuse to be silenced, who'd use Golden Arc to rewrite her story. I parked and stood at my balcony, the city humming softly below. The air smelled like rain and possibility. For the first time in years, I didn't think about Nathan or the wedding or the shame I'd carried for so long. That chapter had already closed itself. This was something else, a beginning disguised as an ending. I picked up my phone, opened my notes app, and typed a line that came to me all at once. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build while you're still here. Then I smiled to myself, hit save, and whispered into the golden light spilling across the horizon. This time, it's not about being seen. It's about helping others see themselves. The producer's voice crackled through the earpiece as I waited backstage. 2 minutes, Ms. Harper. The segment's called Breaking the Ceiling. The anchor will ask about Golden Arc's global impact and the foundation. Just speak from the heart. I adjusted the microphone clipped to my dress and glanced at the studio monitor. The screen showed a highlight reel of my life, the Forbes cover, the FinTech Summit, the gala for the Golden Foundation. But as the images flashed by, one line from my past echoed louder than anything the audience could see. You're too broke. Leave the gift and go. That sentence had once defined me. Now it was part of my story, but no longer my shadow. 30 seconds, the producer said. I exhaled slowly. Calm, not cold. That was my mantra now. The stage manager gestured. I stepped into the bright lights of the studio. The host, a polished woman in her 40s named Clarissa Vance, rose from her chair to greet me. Lydia Harper, she said warmly. The woman turning blockchain into a bridge for women around the world. We shook hands and took our seats as the cameras rolled. Welcome, she said. You've been called a pioneer, a disruptor, even the golden visionary. But when people see you now, it's hard to imagine that only a few years ago you were broke. I finished smiling. You can say it. The audience laughed softly. Clarissa smiled, relieved. Broke, yes. And now you're leading one of the most influential companies in decentralized finance. How did that transformation begin? I looked directly into the camera. It began with failure. The kind that strips away every illusion about who you are. When you've been humiliated, dismissed, and told you don't belong, you start asking yourself what's left when everything you built your worth on disappears. For me, the answer was simple myself. Clarissa leaned forward. And Golden Art grew from that. It grew from necessity, I said. I wanted to create a system where no one's future depended on being born into privilege or proximity. DeFi, decentralized finance, became a metaphor as much as a model. It's about ownership. About saying, I can build my life without asking for permission. The crowd applauded. Clarissa smiled, then shifted her tone. But this isn't just business for you, is it? The Golden Foundation is now active in 30 countries with over 200,000 women enrolled. Why focus on older women? I hesitated not for effect, but from emotion. Because they were invisible for too long. The world celebrates innovation, but it often forgets experience. The women over 50 who raised families, built communities, survived change, they deserve a place in the digital future too. The foundation isn't a charity. It's justice. For a moment, the studio was completely silent. Clarissa's expression softened. That's powerful, she said quietly. And personal, I think. I smiled. It is. My mother enrolled in one of our first online workshops under a different name. She wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Last month, she called me to say she bought her first stock using our app. She was so proud. That's what drives me now, watching people rediscover their own power. There was something freeing in saying that out loud, in realizing that my story had stopped being about revenge long ago. Clarissa glanced at her notes. You mentioned before that you've reconciled with your family. That must feel like closing a long, painful chapter. It does, I said. But it's not about rewriting the past. It's about understanding it. I needed the struggle to build who I became. And they needed the distance to see me clearly. Now we meet halfway, not as enemies, not as victims, but as adults, who finally understand what love looks like without control. The applause swelled again. As the interview wrapped, Clarissa turned to the camera. Lydia Harper, entrepreneur visionary, and proof that success built from pain can change the world for others. When the cameras cut, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You didn't just give an interview, she said softly. You gave people permission to start over. After the show, I stepped outside into the crisp Manhattan air. The city was glowing early evening, the sky dipped in gold and violet. A small crowd had gathered outside the studio holding magazines, notebooks, even phones for autographs. But one woman stood apart, hesitant. She was maybe in her late 50s, wearing a modest navy coat, her eyes shining with something that felt familiar, the blend of hope and fear that comes before change. Ms. Harper, she said, her voice trembling, I just wanted to thank you. I took one of your foundation courses. I started my own online business last month. It's small, but it's mine. I smiled and hugged her. It's not small, I said. It's the start of something golden. She laughed through tears, whispering, I never thought I could do this. Neither did I. I told her. When I got into the car, my phone buzzed a message from Nathan. I saw the interview. You were incredible, Mom cried. Dad said he's finally proud. We all are. For a long moment, I stared at the message. There were no more sharp edges left between us, only peace. As the car pulled away, the skyline glittered in the reflection of the glass, each light a story, a possibility, a life being rewritten. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I was just living the proof. The sound of rain against glass has always comforted me. It's the one rhythm that never demands, only reminds. Tonight that rhythm filled my penthouse as I sat by the window, the city below blurred by mist and light. Somewhere down there, deals were being made, dreams were being broken and rebuilt. But for once, I wasn't chasing any of it. I was still. A glass of wine sat untouched beside the latest Forbes issue, the anniversary edition. The cover headline read, "Golden Ark Turns 5, Lydia Harper on Building a Legacy That Lasts." My photo wasn't on it this time. Instead, it was a collage of faces, women, men, students, entrepreneurs, all part of the Golden Foundation's programs. Seeing them made me prouder than any solo feature ever could. I was supposed to be preparing for another conference in Geneva, the Global Innovation Forum. Dalton had already texted Packlight. "They're giving you the Lifetime Achievement Award." I hadn't responded yet, because tonight didn't feel like a night to plan the next step. It felt like one to remember the first. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A video call request, Nathan. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me softened. I answered. His face appeared smiling in that familiar, half-nervous way. "Hey, Lyd. Hey, Nathan. You look peaceful," he said. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." I almost didn't. He laughed quietly. "Fair enough. Listen, I wanted to tell you something. Vanessa's pregnant. We just found out." My chest warmed. "Nathan, that's wonderful." "Yeah," he said, smiling wider. "It's crazy, right? And I've been thinking a lot. About family. About the kind of brother I was to you. I can't change the past, but I want my kid to grow up knowing that humility matters more than status. You taught me that." For a second, I didn't trust my voice. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means more than you know." We talked for almost an hour about his work, about Vanessa, about Mom's latest obsession with yoga, and Dad's attempts at cooking since retirement. It felt normal, something we'd never really had before. When the call ended, I stared at the dark screen, smiling through quiet tears. The rain had stopped. The city sparkled fresh and alive. The next morning, I drove to the Golden Ark headquarters before sunrise. The lobby was empty, the air crisp with the faint scent of coffee and ambition. I walked through the glass doors of the Foundation's new wing, still under construction walls, half-painted, the air buzzing with potential. At the center of the main hall stood a large installation being assembled for the grand reopening. The artist had designed it to capture our journey, interlocking golden arcs rising from a base of fractured stone. Imperfection giving birth to strength. I ran my hand along the cool surface, tracing the lines. The cracks reminded me of myself, every failure, every scar, every word that had once been meant to break me. Ruth appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "You're here early," she said. "I couldn't sleep." She smiled. "Big week ahead. Geneva, the award, the foundation launch. Are you ready for the next era of Lydia Harper?" I looked at her. My friend, my partner, the first person who'd believed when I had nothing. "You know," I said softly for the first time, "I don't feel like I'm starting something new. I feel like I've arrived." She nodded, her eyes bright. "That's because you finally built a life you don't have to run from." We walked together through the nearly finished hall, discussing the final touches. Before leaving, I paused at the installation one more time. "Let's call it the Ark of Worth," I said. "Because that's what this has all been about, finding value that can't be measured." Later that afternoon, I flew to Geneva. The sky outside the jet window glowed amber as the sun set over the Atlantic, the clouds glimmering like liquid gold. Dalton sat across from me, reading a file. "You never stop to think about how far you've come?" he asked without looking up. "All the time," I said. "But I try not to stay there too long. It's a good place to visit, not live." He smiled. Wise as ever. When we landed, cameras flashed, reporters called my name. Microphones caught fragments of words, innovation empowerment, blockchain DeFi legacy. It all felt surreal. Yet somewhere deep inside, I knew none of those words defined me. That night, under the shimmering lights of the gala, they handed me the award, a golden arc curved upward like the rising sun. I held it in my hands, feeling its weight. I stepped to the podium. 5 years ago, I stood outside a wedding hall and was told I was too broke to belong. Tonight I stand before you, surrounded by people who believe otherwise. But this I held up, the award isn't mine alone. It belongs to every woman who decided she was enough long before anyone else did. Applause thundered through the hall. And if there's one thing I've learned, I continued, it's that revenge fades but purpose endures. You can build your life on bitterness, or you can build it on meaning. One burns fast. The other shines forever. The standing ovation felt distant, almost dreamlike. All I could think of was how far the echo of that old insult had traveled, and how it had transformed into applause. Later, back in my hotel room, I stood on the balcony overlooking the quiet lake. The moon shimmered on the water like molten gold. I whispered to the reflection, to the woman I once was, the one who left that wedding humiliated and small. "You did it," I said softly. "But more importantly, you healed." And as the city lights flickered in the distance, I smiled, not as the CEO of Golden Arc, not as the woman redefining trust, but simply as Lydia. A woman who had learned that true wealth isn't counted in dollars or titles. It's counted in peace.